A boy shining shoes at the train station glanced at a formula on a wind-blown newspaper, then rewrote the correct version on a dirty wall using a piece of coal. The morning wind had teeth that day. It slid down from the hills east of town, sweeping through the narrow streets and rattling the loose tin signs above the diner and the barber shop. By the time it reached the old train station, it had gathered a sharpness that could slip through wool and sting the skin. The station had been built 50 years ago, back when the town mattered more. The arched steel roof still stood, but it was freckled with rust the color of dried blood. Long streaks of soot trailed down the brick walls, souvenirs from 1,000 locomotives that had passed under its shadow. The floor was made of wide stone slabs, worn smooth by decades of boots. Noah sat near the edge of the platform, just under the wind's path. He had a small wooden box, its lid fitted with a rest for shoes. A pair of polish tins sat inside, along with brushes worn soft from years of use. His hands, small and narrow, moved quickly despite the cold, rubbing the dark cream into the leather until it shone like wet glass. He was only 12, but there was nothing childish about the way he worked. His eyes, a deep, steady brown, missed nothing. He kept track of every coin, every regular customer, every odd detail of their shoes. A man in a blue conductor's coat once joked, "That boy can read a life from a pair of heels." It wasn't far from the truth. Noah could tell the difference between the long, even wear of a salesman who walked city blocks and the uneven scuff of a man who worked a farm. Soldiers' boots told their own story. Dust pressed into the seams, leather dried from sun more than rain. This morning, he was polishing the shoes of a tall man in a camel overcoat, a man who stepped off the first-class carriage with the kind of quiet authority that said he was used to being obeyed. The man read a folded newspaper as Noah worked, his breath clouding in the cold. Then the wind came. It hit the platform in a sudden gust, strong enough to make the overhead signs creak, and the man's coat flare open. His newspaper was snatched from his hands before he could react. It spun away like a bird startled into flight, fluttering along the platform until it slid to a stop right against Noah's scuffed boot. Noah picked it up without thinking. Normally, he would have folded it and handed it back, but the man was already striding away toward the taxi line, calling over his shoulder for Noah to keep the change. The boy looked down. The newspaper smelled faintly of cologne and coal smoke. When he turned to the middle page, his eyes caught on something that rooted him to the spot. It was an article about improving freight rail efficiency. Nothing that should interest a boy from the back of the station. But across the page was a printed map. Dots for towns, lines for rail connections. Beside it was a long equation broken into neat lines. Noah did not read it the way most people would. He didn't see numbers and variables. He saw rail tracks bending and splitting, cargo moving along them, bottlenecks forming where the lines narrowed. His gaze fixed on one section of the formula. To him, it was as if someone had drawn a junction pointing the wrong way, forcing the flow to loop needlessly before reaching its destination. He could almost feel the wasted time, the unnecessary fuel burned, the extra strain on the system. He frowned. In his mind, he began rearranging things, the way he might shift shoe boxes on a crowded shelf to make more space. A small change here, a slight rebalancing there, and the whole network would breathe easier. Noah reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a stub of coal. He carried it to mark customers' names on pieces of cardboard, his ledger, as he called it. But now, he crossed the platform to a section of wall between two windows, where the bricks were darkened by decades of soot. Leaning close, he began to write. His letters were rough, leaning uphill, but his hands were steady. He copied the core of the printed equation, but changed the arrangement of the terms. He added a short correction at the end, something small but vital. When he stepped back, the marks stood out in a faint, smoky black against the wall, not elegant, but clear. A young man in a university sweatshirt happened to pass by, chewing the last bite of a breakfast sandwich. He slowed when he noticed the writing. At first, he smirked. Some bored kid, he thought. But as his eyes moved over the coal marks, the smirk faded. The change wasn't random. It made sense. Unsettling, precise sense. The flaw in the original? Gone. The bottleneck? Fixed. He pulled out his phone and took several photos, frowning in concentration. Noah, unaware, had already gone back to his box. The next customer was a station porter whose boots were dusted white from carrying bags through the salt piled outside the doors. "Cold enough for you, Noah?" the porter asked.
"Could be worse," Noah replied, brushing the salt from the leather. "At least the trains are still running." The porter chuckled, stomping his feet for warmth. "Boy like you ought to be inside somewhere. School, maybe." "School starts later," Noah said simply, though he didn't mention that later often meant not at all when the rent was due. The wind caught the abandoned newspaper again, flipping it down the platform. Noah didn't follow it with his eyes. He didn't need to.
The real story was already on the wall, written in coal. Hours later, the platform emptied. The morning trains had all gone, leaving the station to a few loitering pigeons and the sound of a mop slapping water against tile. The marks Noah had made were still there, faint but stubborn, the way chalk lines sometimes linger after the rain. Somewhere far away, those photographs would be opened on a laptop screen. People in quiet offices would zoom in, puzzled, curious. They would argue in hushed tones about who had written them and why. But here, in the shadow of the old roof, Noah kept polishing shoes. He didn't know he had just set something in motion. And if he had known, he might still have done it. Not for fame, not for money, but simply because, to him, the wrong track is a wrong track, and fixing it is the only thing that makes sense. The coal marks stayed until the first rain 2 weeks later. By then, strangers had already begun looking for the boy who wrote them. But on that cold morning, it was just another day at the station, and Noah was just a boy with a shoebox, a piece of coal, and a way of seeing the world that no one else quite shared. The photograph didn't make a sound when it first appeared online. It arrived quietly, the way a single snowflake falls on an empty street, unnoticed at first, almost weightless. Mark, the young man in the university sweatshirt, had taken the picture on the platform without a second thought. He uploaded it that evening to a small private forum, a corner of the internet known only to graduate students, junior researchers, and a handful of professors. The group called themselves RailNet Exchange. Most days their posts were as dry as winter timber. Scans of freight schedules from the 1970s, obscure journal papers no one else would read, late-night arguments about whether a certain algorithm should use a different weighting factor. Mark didn't add much. Just 4 words under the photo. Found this at the station. The image showed a patch of old brick wall, dark with soot, the coal marks standing out like faint black veins. The writing was rough, crooked equal signs, numbers leaning into one another, yet it had a strange balance, like a hand-drawn map where every curve mattered. At first, the comments were lighthearted. Someone joked that it was the ghost of a bored mathematician. Another suggested it was street art for nerds. But then a user named Harris, a second-year PhD student in applied mathematics, zoomed in on the markings and froze. "This looks familiar," he typed. Within half an hour, the thread had doubled in length. People were comparing the wall's equation to a recent publication in Journal of Transportation Systems. They noted a subtle but deliberate change, a rearranged term, a small corrective piece that balanced the entire formula. One member wrote, "This fixes the bottleneck problem, the one from the Stanford paper last year." Another replied, No way this was accidental. The tone shifted. No one was joking anymore. That afternoon, in a cramped office on the 12th floor of a logistics building in Chicago, Elena Cruz scrolled through her lunch break. She was a research assistant at Western Rail Logistics, a national company with more spreadsheets than locomotives. Her desk was buried under printed maps, coffee-stained notebooks, and a half-eaten granola bar. She clicked on the thread almost absent-mindedly, until her eyes landed on the photo. The coal marks were messy, but the idea behind them was not. It was a correction she had been chasing for weeks, trying to close the gap between theoretical efficiency and the stubborn reality of freight schedules. The journal version of the equation had a flaw so small it seemed harmless, unless you were obsessed with perfecting it. Elena was. She leaned closer to her screen. The adjustment wasn't just correct, it was elegant, in its own raw way. Whoever wrote it had cut straight to the heart of the issue without leaving a trail of unnecessary steps. That kind of confidence usually belonged to seasoned experts, not strangers scribbling on a station wall. She reread the thread. No one knew who had written it. The original poster, Mark, wasn't answering questions. Elena drummed her fingers on the desk. She told herself it didn't matter, that good ideas could come from anywhere, that she didn't need to meet the person, but something in her refused to let it go. Over the next 2 days, she returned to the photo again and again. She printed it out and pinned it to the wall above her desk. She traced the coal marks with her finger, imagining the moment they had been made, the hand holding the coal, the hesitation before the first line, the decision to add that small but vital term. Her colleagues noticed the printout. "What's that?" one asked. "A correction," Elena said without looking up. "From who?" She hesitated. "I don't know yet." That evening, she stayed late in the office. The city outside her window glowed in the snowlight, and the hum of the heating system was the only sound. She searched through weather reports, looking for towns that had old brick stations, the kind of soot-dark walls that could hold coal marks. She cross-referenced freight line maps, thinking about where someone might have easy access to the printed equation in the first place. Her laptop screen was soon cluttered with tabs, station photos, service schedules, lists of rural towns. She didn't notice how late it was until the cleaning crew switched off the overhead lights. Meanwhile, in that small town far away, Noah was back on the platform the next morning, shining a pair of worn work boots. "You hear they're closing the North Spur line?" the boots owner said. Noah shook his head. "Too expensive to run. Can't keep the freight moving fast enough." The man sighed. "Everything's slow these days." Noah listened quietly, but in his mind, he was moving freight again, not in numbers, but in shapes and paths. He imagined the rails like ribbons laid across a map, shifting them until the knots came loose. To him, the problem was clear, but he had learned long ago that most people didn't see what he saw. Back on the RailNet Exchange forum, the thread was now more than 50 comments deep. Someone had traced the brick pattern in the photo and matched it to an old station blueprint, narrowing the possible locations to fewer than 10. One user half-jokingly suggested organizing a field trip to find the mysterious wall. But for Elena, the joke was already a plan. On Friday morning, Mark finally replied to her private message. "Platform 3, near the water stand, small kid, maybe 12. He was polishing shoes when I saw him." That was all she needed. On Saturday, Elena stood in the ticket line at Union Station with a small overnight bag. The departures board rattled above her head. She had a thermos of coffee in one hand, a folded printout of the coal-marked wall in the other. As the train pulled out of the city, the skyline slipped away into winter fields. She sat by the window, the photo in her lap, wondering what kind of 12-year-old wrote freight equations between customers. Her colleagues would laugh if they knew where she was going.
They'd call it chasing ghosts. But Elena had a feeling about this one, that the ghost might turn out to be very real and very much alive. And under the soot-dark roof of that distant station, Noah would be there, as always, with his wooden box and his piece of coal, unaware that someone was already on her way to find him. The train from the city groaned as it pulled into Platform 3. Steam hissed from beneath the cars, curling into the cold air like breath from a sleeping animal. The sky above the old station was the pale color of tin, and the wind carried the sharp smell of coal and iron. Elena stepped down from the carriage with her overnight bag slung over one shoulder. Her boots made a soft, hollow sound on the worn stone. She had been here before, years ago, passing through on the way to a conference. But this morning she was looking at everything with new eyes. The curve of the steel roof, the soot-darkened brick, the cluster of benches near the water stand. And there he was. A small boy sat cross-legged on a low wooden box, a brush in one hand, a tin of polish in the other. His head was bent over a pair of leather shoes that had clearly seen better days. His coat was thin, his gloves fingerless, but there was no hurry in his movements. Each stroke of the brush was careful, deliberate. Elena paused a few steps away. The coal-marked wall from the photograph was behind him, its surface scrubbed, but still faintly darker where the writing had been. She walked closer, and the boy looked up. His eyes were steady, almost too steady for someone his age. "You shine shoes?" she asked. "That's what the box is for," he said without smiling. His voice was quiet but clear. She glanced at the shoes on her feet, scuffed from city sidewalks. "How much?" $2, he said. She sat down on the wooden stool opposite him. As he began working, she noticed his hands, small but quick, fingers blackened from coal dust and polish. "You from around here?" she asked. He gave a small shrug. "Around enough." "What about school?" He looked up at her for a moment. "Starts later," he said, the same way someone might say after the rain. She let the silence hang for a while, listening to the slow scrape of the brush. Then she asked, "Do you ever write on the walls here?" That got a flicker of something in his expression. Not fear, exactly, but a guardedness, like a door being pushed halfway shut. "Why?" he asked. "I saw a picture," Elena said. "A formula. Looked like you changed it." He didn't answer. He kept brushing, then reached for the polishing cloth. "I work with trains," she went on. "Freight routes. That change you made. It fixes a problem a lot of people haven't been able to solve." He stopped, just for a heartbeat. Then he said, "It was wrong." "What was?" "The formula in the paper," he said simply. "It sent things the long way." Elena felt a strange mix of disbelief and admiration. "And you could tell that just from looking?" He finally met her eyes. "You ever see a cart stuck in a corner because someone left a broom in the way? You don't need a map to know it's wrong. You just move the broom." She almost laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was so perfectly clear. "That's exactly what you did," she said softly. They were still sitting there when a group of college students passed through the platform, loud and joking. One of them glanced over, saw the boy with his shoebox, and muttered something to his friend. "Bet he can't even read what he wrote," the friend said, loud enough to carry. Noah's hands stilled on the shoe he was polishing. He looked up at them, not angry, just steady. "You don't have to read the whole train schedule to know when one track's blocked," he said. The students went quiet for a moment before walking on. Elena watched them go, a small smile tugging at the corner of her mouth. When Noah finished with her boots, she paid him and stood. "Do you want to see something?" she asked. "What?" "I can show you where that formula came from," she said. "Not just the paper,
The real network. The whole country's freight map. His brow furrowed. You mean, like all the tracks at once? Yes, and the numbers that go with them. For the first time since she'd arrived, she saw a spark in his eyes, curiosity breaking through the guardedness. She lowered her voice. I have access to a lab at the university. We could go tonight after hours. No one has to know. Noah looked back toward the end of the platform, where the town stretched out in a row of tired buildings. Then he looked at her. If I go, can I draw on the boards? Elena almost laughed again. That's the idea. That night, the station would grow quiet after the last evening train. And somewhere in a locked lab in the city, a 12-year-old boy from the wrong side of the tracks would stand before a wall of maps and diagrams and start moving pieces no one else had dared to shift. But for now, under the soot-dark roof, their meeting had begun, with a pair of scuffed boots, a small wooden box, and the kind of conversation that changes the direction of a story. The wind had turned sharp by nightfall, the kind of wind that made streetlights flicker and rattled the glass in old windows. The last passenger train had already left the station, carrying with it the noise of the day. What remained was a platform washed in yellow light, the quiet shuffle of the janitor's broom, and the low hum of the vending machine near the ticket counter. Elena stood at the far end of Platform 3, her collar turned up against the cold. She checked her watch, then looked toward the shadowed corner where Noah usually sat. He appeared silently, his small frame wrapped in the same thin coat she'd seen that morning. The wooden Shoeshine box hung from his hand like a soldier's satchel. You sure about this? She asked. He nodded once. They walked together toward the parking lot. Her car, a faded green hatchback, looked out of place among the empty spaces. Noah climbed in without a word, placing his box on the floor between his feet. The road to the city wound through dark stretches of farmland, the headlights catching the pale glint of frost on the grass. For a while, neither of them spoke. Then Noah asked, "Why do you care about the wall?" Elena thought for a moment before answering. Because I've been stuck on that problem for weeks. And you? Fixed it in 30 seconds. It wasn't 30 seconds, he said. It was about a minute. She smiled at the correction. The university campus was nearly empty when they arrived. Winter break had drained it of most students, leaving only a few lights burning in dorm windows. Elena parked near the engineering building, its glass doors reflecting the glow of the street lamps. Inside, the halls smelled faintly of dust and copier ink. Their footsteps echoed off the tile floor as she led him toward a locked door at the end of a corridor. She swiped her ID card, and the lock clicked open. The lab was less a laboratory than a war room for freight systems. The walls were lined with whiteboards and corkboards, each covered in maps, charts, and lines of equations. A row of computers faced a central projection screen, which was dark for now. Noah stepped inside slowly, his eyes moving over the walls as if he'd walked into a cathedral. This is all of it? He asked. Most of it, Elena said. She switched on the projector, and the National Rail Network bloomed across the front wall, a spider web of lines stretching from coast to coast. He walked closer, tilting his head as he traced the routes with his eyes. It's wrong, he said quietly. Elena raised an eyebrow. Already? He pointed to a dense cluster of lines in the Midwest. Here. Too many trains cross the same point, makes everything wait. That's Chicago, she said. It's a hub. It's a knot, Noah replied. You can untie it. She handed him a whiteboard marker. Show me. He hesitated only long enough to slide his Shoeshine box into the corner. Then he began to draw, not copying the map, but reshaping it. He shifted lines, added connections in places she'd never considered, erased others entirely. The changes looked random at first, but when he stepped back, a new pattern emerged. Cleaner, shorter, more balanced. "What you just did," Elena said slowly, "would cut average travel time by at least 12%. Noah shrugged as if she'd told him the weather forecast. "It's just moving the broom." They worked for nearly 2 hours. Elena would pull up a section of the network on her laptop, and Noah would glance at it before suggesting a shift here, a reroute there. Sometimes he would explain it in terms of things he knew, the way water flowed around stones in a gutter, or how kids ran through the alleys to avoid the crowded Main Street. At one point, she tested him with a trick scenario, a supply route where she'd deliberately hidden a small inefficiency. He found it in less than a minute, grinning faintly as he circled it. "You left the broom in the corner," he said. Elena realized she was grinning too. But the night wasn't without shadows. Around 11, as she was pulling up another map, the door suddenly opened. A tall man in a dark overcoat stepped inside. Professor Whitaker, head of the Transportation Systems Department. His eyes swept the room, stopping on Noah. "What is this?" he demanded. Elena stood quickly. "I was just—" "You know this lab is not open to the public," Whitaker cut in. His gaze shifted back to Noah. "And who is this? A student? No. Too young." "He's helping me with a model," Elena said, her voice tight. Whitaker walked to the whiteboard, scanning Noah's drawings. His frown deepened. "This is nonsense. You let a child scribble over department property?" "It's not nonsense," Elena said, heat rising in her voice. "Look at the reroutes." "I see vandalism," Whitaker said sharply. He picked up the eraser and, with 3 sweeping motions, wiped away the heart of Noah's design. Noah didn't move. He stood quietly, hands in his pockets, watching the whiteboard turn blank again. "Clear the room," Whitaker said. "Now!" Outside, in the cold hallway, Elena muttered an apology. Noah shook his head. "It's okay. I still remember it." She looked at him. "You remember all of it?" He nodded. "I don't forget the tracks once I see them." Back at her apartment that night, Elena could barely sleep. The image of Whitaker's eraser sweeping away those lines burned in her mind, but so did Noah's calm face, and the way he'd said, "I still remember it." The next morning, one of the graduate students who had been working late sent her a text. "I saved a photo of the board before Whitaker erased it. You'll want to see this." She opened it, and there it was. Noah's network, complete and intact, the lines crisp in black marker. Somewhere, she thought, this map deserved to be seen. That thought would be the first step towards something neither of them could yet imagine. An invitation, not from her, but from people far beyond the walls of the university. But for now, the unofficial invitation was simply this. One winter night, a boy from a soot-dark platform had stood in the center of a quiet lab and redrawn the country's arteries in a way no one else had dared. The morning after their night in the lab, the city seemed sharper somehow. The light, the air, even the edges of buildings. It was one of those winter days where the cold didn't just bite. It pressed in on you, reminding you that warmth was something you had to make for yourself. Noah sat at the small kitchen table in Elena's apartment, hands wrapped around a chipped mug of cocoa. Steam curled upward in thin ribbons. He had barely spoken since they'd returned the night before. Elena sat across from him, tapping a pencil against a yellow legal pad. On the pad, she'd tried to recreate the network changes he'd drawn in the lab. She'd remembered some, the major reroutes, the new connections, but not the fine details. The delicate adjustments that gave the map its balance were gone from her mind, though she suspected they weren't gone from his. "You really do remember all of it?" she asked. Noah nodded without looking up. like pictures in my head. Could you draw it again? Yes, he said simply. Then he added, but not here. I need space. They didn't get the chance. By mid-morning, Elena's phone buzzed with an email from the department. Effective immediately. Unauthorized access to research labs will result in suspension of ID privileges. Security review pending. Her stomach sank. She knew who had triggered it. When she arrived at the university to plead her case, the mood in the department had already shifted. Whitaker's voice had carried through the hallway the night before. A voice that spoke not just of rules, but of insult. The man saw her as reckless, undermining the seriousness of the work. To him, the lab was sacred space. Letting a boy from a train station scribble on the boards was sacrilege. By the time she stepped into his office, Whitaker was already on the offensive. "Do you understand," he began, not looking up from his desk, "how this makes the department appear?" "Better if you ask me," Elena said, her voice steady. He finally looked at her, his expression a mix of disbelief and irritation. "You let an unqualified stranger alter ongoing research. That's not collaboration there. That's contamination." She folded her arms. "He solved a problem your postdocs have been circling for months." Whitaker's jaw tightened. "Even if that were true, which I doubt, it is irrelevant. There is no record, no data, and no permission." "There is a record," Elena said quietly. "A student took a photo before you erased it." His eyes narrowed. "Delete it." She didn't answer. That afternoon, she and Noah were asked to leave the building. He didn't seem surprised. On the walk back to her apartment, he carried his Shoeshine box in both hands, as if it were the only thing that belonged to him in the whole city. They stopped at a small park on the edge of campus. The benches were dusted with frost, and the fountain in the center had been drained for the winter. "Are you angry?" she asked. Noah shook his head. "It's just a wall. Walls get wiped." "But you worked so hard." "I didn't work hard," he interrupted. "It's just what I saw. If they don't want it, it's still in my head." There was no bitterness in his tone, just a quiet certainty that unsettled her more than anger would have. That night, in another part of the city, a small group of experts was meeting in a windowless conference room. The photograph of Noah's whiteboard design was projected on the wall. A man in a gray suit leaned forward. "Where did this come from?" The graduate student who'd saved the image hesitated. "I don't know exactly. A boy drew it in the lab last night. He wasn't a student." The man studied the lines. "This removes the bottleneck entirely, and the secondary congestion in the northern corridor." He sat back, impressed despite himself. The photo was saved, emailed, forwarded. By morning, it had reached a closed group preparing for an upcoming logistics conference in New York. Noah knew nothing about any of this. Back at the station the next day, he returned to his place near the water stand. The wall where he'd first written in coal was clean now, scrubbed until the soot marks were just a memory. Passengers came and went. Some days it felt like his life was measured not in hours, but in pairs of shoes. A businessman in a black coat asked, "You always work here?" "Most days," Noah said. "You should think about other things," the man replied, tossing a bill into the box. Noah only smiled faintly. His mind was already somewhere else, running along rails, shifting tracks, finding paths no one else had seen yet. Late that afternoon, Elena returned from a tense meeting with her supervisor. She knelt beside his box. "Something's happening," she said in a low voice. "People saw the photo. People outside the university." "Good people?" Noah asked. "I think so. But they'll want to meet you." He looked at her for a long moment, then went back to polishing the shoe in front of him. "If they have a wall, I'll draw on it." By the end of that week, The phrase, "the boy from Platform 3, had begun to circulate in certain quiet corners of the freight industry. Some thought he was a hoax. Others thought he was a savant hidden away in the Midwest. Whitaker heard the whispers too, but he told himself they'd fade, as whispers always do. He didn't yet know that the erasure he'd made on the whiteboard had done nothing to stop what had started. If anything, it had made the story sharper, because now it wasn't just about a formula. It was about the boy who had seen the path when everyone else saw only the walls. The call came on a Tuesday morning, in the quiet hour after the first train had left and before the second one pulled in. Noah was crouched over a pair of brown work boots, rubbing polish into the leather in slow, even circles. The platform was nearly empty except for a woman reading a paperback on the far bench and an old man in a flat cap sipping coffee from a paper cup. Elena arrived with her scarf pulled high against the cold, her phone pressed to her ear. She was listening more than speaking, her eyes fixed on the ground as if weighing each word she heard. When she hung up, she stood in front of him for a moment, letting the sound of the train whistle in the distance fill the silence. "That was someone from New York," she said finally. Noah looked up. "For you?" "For you," she corrected. "They're hosting a closed conference on freight optimization. The kind where they don't just let anyone in the room. Someone showed them the photo of your design." He kept polishing. "What do they want?" "They want to meet you. They want you to talk about what you did." He didn't answer right away. The sound of the brush on leather filled the space between them. "Would I have to wear a suit?" he asked at last. Elena smiled faintly. "Probably not, but you'd have to travel and talk to a room full of people who think they've seen everything." "Have they?" "No," she said. "Not what you've seen." That evening, Elena laid out the situation in her small kitchen. "The conference is in a week," she explained. "It's invite only. They'll cover the train fare, the hotel, even a small honorarium." "What's an honorarium?" Noah asked. "Money they give you to thank you for speaking." "I don't need money," he said. "It's not about need. It's courtesy." She hesitated. "But it's also pressure. If you go, people will ask questions. They'll want to know how you think. They might even try to take credit for your ideas." He tilted his head. "Why?" "Because that's what happens when someone brings something new into a room full of people who think they've already built everything worth building." Noah was quiet for a long time, staring into the steam rising from his cocoa. Then he said, "If I don't go, do they still have the photo?" "Yes." "Then it's already in the room," he said. 2 days later, Elena brought the news that changed the tone of their plans. "Noah," she said, "your mother got a notice from the landlord. Rent's overdue. He's threatening eviction." Noah's jaw tightened. He didn't say anything, but his hands curled slightly on the edge of the table. "I know you don't want to go for the money," she said gently, "but if you go, you can use that honorarium to cover what she owes." That was when he looked up. "Then we should go." They booked tickets for the night train to New York. The day of departure was gray and windless, the kind of winter day that felt like the world was holding its breath. Noah packed lightly, a spare shirt, a notebook, the stub of coal he still carried out of habit. The train left just after dusk. They found seats by the window in a half-empty carriage. The steady hum of the wheels on the rails filled the air like a low drum beat. At first, Noah sat quietly, watching the lights of small towns flicker past. But after an hour, he pulled a paper napkin from the seat-back pocket and a pen from his jacket. "What are you doing?" Elena asked. "Thinking about disasters," he said without looking up. "What kind of disasters?" "Ones where roads are blocked, floods, storms. People need food, water, medicine. Trucks can't get in, but trains can, if you change the routes." He began sketching a cluster of lines on the napkin, adjusting them, then adding arrows to show direction. He drew little circles to represent relief stations, shifting them until they sat in the shortest paths between supply hubs. "This would get supplies there 2 days faster," he said simply. Elena leaned over to look. "You just thought of this now?" He shrugged. "I saw it when the train left the station." A man sitting across the aisle had been pretending not to watch, but now he leaned forward. He was in his 40s with a neatly trimmed beard and a laptop open on the tray table. "That's interesting work," the man said casually. "What field are you in?" Noah looked at him blankly. "I shine shoes." The man chuckled, but Elena's eyes narrowed. Something about his interest felt too sharp, too focused. "Just doodles," she said, folding the napkin and slipping it into her bag. The man smiled politely, but when he returned to his laptop, his fingers typed quickly, as if recording something before it could fade. They reached New York just before dawn, stepping out into the metallic chill of the city. The station was enormous, a cathedral of steel and light compared to the quiet platform back home. At the hotel, Noah barely glanced at the view from their 12th floor window. He was more interested in the city map on the desk, running his finger along the grid of streets. Elena watched him from the doorway. "You don't have to impress them, you know," she said. "I'm not trying to," he replied. "I just want the tracks to make sense." In a conference room across town, the organizers were already buzzing. The schedule listed Noah simply as guest speaker, emerging perspectives on network optimization. The vagueness only fueled curiosity. Some expected a young graduate student. Others imagined a maverick professor from abroad. None of them pictured a 12-year-old with a shoebox tucked under his arm. Back in their hotel room, Elena went over the plan one last time. "You don't have to use slides," she told him. "Just talk them through how you saw the problem. If they ask questions you don't want to answer, say so. This is your time." Noah nodded. "Do they have a board?" "Yes." "Then I'll just draw it." Neither of them knew that somewhere in the city, the man from the train, the one with the neatly trimmed beard, was in a meeting of his own. He was talking to people from a rival logistics firm, sliding a napkin across the table. "This," he said, "came from a kid on the night train. He's speaking tomorrow. If we move fast, we can—" His voice dropped, but the room leaned in to listen. Back in their hotel, Noah sat at the desk, looking down at the streets far below. "Elena," he said softly, "when you get to a fork in the tracks, how do you know which way to go?" She thought about it. "You look at where you've been and where you need to be, and you try to choose the one that keeps you moving forward." He nodded, as if that answer had confirmed something he already knew. "Then, tomorrow," he said, "we'll take the right track." The night train slid out of the station like a dark river leaving its banks, humming low, as if careful not to wake the winter fields. The cars rocked with a gentle sway that made talk fall into a slower rhythm and thoughts grow long. Lights along the tracks went by in even beats, like the steady pulse of a patient heart. Noah and Elena found their seats near the center of the car. The window was cool to the touch. Beyond it lay a plain of hard snow and far-off barns, their roofs silver under the moon. The car itself held the quiet company of strangers. A nurse dozing with her badge turned inward, a man in a suit reading a thick book, two brothers trading a baseball back and forth between the seats with monk-like care, and, across the aisle, a man with a neat beard and a laptop open to a blank document. "Long ride," Elena said softly. "Long enough," Noah answered, still watching the rhythm of the passing poles. They did not speak for a while. The train has a way of doing that to people. It takes the need to fill silence and trades it for the wish to listen, to the rails, to the wind, to one another when words finally come. When the conductor punched their tickets, he paused, squinting kindly at Noah's Shoeshine box resting under the seat. "You keeping that safe for someone, son?" "It is mine," Noah said. "Ah," the conductor replied, as if that explained a great deal. "Good hands keep good tools. You two going all the way to the city?" "We are," Elena said. "Early morning arrival." "Then do yourselves a favor and take a walk to the diner car before midnight," the conductor advised. "Coffee tastes better when the world outside is just a streak." He moved on down the aisle. Elena smiled. "You up for the diner car?" "After I think," Noah said. He pulled a paper napkin from the seat-back pocket and, with the blunt end of a hotel pen Elena had given him, began to draw. Not lines and arrows this time. Just boxes for towns and short dashes for tracks between them, a child's map at first glance. The neat bearded man across the aisle pretended not to watch, but his eyes kept finding their way over. "What are you working on?" Elena asked, not to rush him, but to make space for him to say it out loud. "Storms," he said. "The kind that put water across roads and bring down power lines. Trucks can be brave, but they still need a road. Trains do not in the same way. If you move the staging depots here and here," he tapped two boxes, "and if you send smaller loads first, the kind that start the chain, water filters, insulin packs, radio batteries, then big loads do not have to wait for a clear road. They meet the smaller ones halfway." He did not say equation or constraint or penalty, words that came easy to people in suits. He said, "Meet halfway." He said smaller first. "How do you decide the order?" Elena asked, still soft. "The order is the thing you do not see when you look at a big pile. You see the pile and think bigger is first. But if two people are cold and you only have one blanket and one stove, you light the stove first. Then two blankets warm faster than one. It is like that." The neat bearded man leaned forward as if the seatbelt of curiosity had tugged him. "Excuse me," he said, pleasant, practiced. I could not help hearing. "Fascinating idea. Are you two in logistics?" "I shine shoes," Noah said, without sarcasm. He went back to the napkin. The man's smile did not falter. He looked at Elena. "And you?" "I work with freight models," she said. "We are going to a small meeting." "Ah," he said, as if that explained another great deal. "I am in the same line, always eager to hear new approaches. The trick with disasters is the human side. People do not behave like trains. They crowd where the light is. They follow one truck and leave the alley clear." "Models miss that." "Good models do not," Elena said, still pleasant. He nodded, tipped an invisible hat, and returned to his laptop. His fingers moved with an easy speed. He had clearly typed before. "Diner car," Elena said. "Come on, bring the napkin." They made their way through two quiet cars, past sleeping travelers, and a mother with a newborn tucked into the triangle of her arm. The diner car was bright and warm, all steel edges and friendly clatter. The waiter called everyone friend, which made the coffee taste better, just as the conductor had promised. They sat in a booth with a window that showed only their own reflection now, two faces in a square of night. The waiter set down a pot of coffee, two thick mugs, and a plate of biscuits that steamed when broken open. He pointed them toward a tray of salt, pepper, sugar packets, and small creamers shaped like little white bells. Noah's hand went to the tray at once. He set a row of sugar packets in a line down the middle of the table. He set salt and pepper shakers at three corners. He turned the creamers on their sides and made them into small, bright depots. "Now watch," he said. He moved a sugar packet 2 inches. "This is the one engine you send first after the storm. It is small. It can pull 3 cars. You do not load it full. You put only what turns the other engines on: fuel for the pumps, filters for the water, Batteries for the radios.
1 hour after it leaves, the next engine can start. Not full either. It carries tools to clear rails, not food to fill warehouses. You fill the warehouses later. First you open the doors. The waiter slowed as he passed, eyes on the little field of packets and bells. "You folks building a city?" he asked. "A door," Noah said, "for a city that has lost its doors." The waiter blinked, smiled, and moved on. "Where are the people?" Elena asked. Noah put 2 coffee stirrers on the table. He crossed them, then slid one to the side. "People move like water when a pipe bursts. They go to where they last found a tap, so you do not hide the tap. You make one right where the rails meet the bus line, even if the bus is not running yet. People will walk to where they remember the bus. That is where you meet them." "You are thinking about memory," Elena said. "Memory moves faster than wheels," he said. The neat bearded man was in the doorway, but a polite distance away, but close enough to hear. He did not order. He watched the table. Elena noticed. She did not ask him to leave. This was a public car, and curiosity was not a crime. But she put her hand on the napkin when Noah paused, a quiet act of guard duty. An older man in a wool cap slid into the booth across the aisle without invitation, the way men who have lived long and alone sometimes drift toward voices. He had a scar along his jaw like a pale thread, and in his eyes there was the careful watchfulness of someone who had stood post somewhere far from home. "You are sending small things first," he said to Noah. "In the war, the radios and the med kits went first. The trucks with warm blankets came later. More men lived that way." "Yes," Noah said. "Never thought I would hear a boy say it so plain," the old man murmured. "Most boys like big trucks." Noah slid one of the creamers toward him. "Here," he said. "You can be this depot. It is closer to the hospital, but not right next to it because noise keeps people awake." The old man laughed, surprised into youth for a second. "Son, I have been called worse than a milk bell." Elena felt a warmth settle in her chest, not just at the sight of the old man smiling, but at the way Noah's world had room for him. In Noah's map, there were no spare people. Everyone could be placed, and the placing gave them meaning. They stayed in the diner car longer than they meant to. The waiter refilled their coffee twice and brought them a second plate of biscuits without charging them. The old man dozed with his arms folded on the table, then woke and told them a story about a flood and a bridge that bent but did not break. The neat bearded man scribbled in a small notebook with the kind of pen people get as gifts in rooms with glass tables. When they finally rose, the Tray City still stood. Elena swept the packets and bells back into their places and wiped the table clean herself, a small act of respect, as if erasing a blessed chalkboard. They walked back through the sleeping cars. People breathed in slow pairs. A child had dropped a toy truck in the aisle. Noah stooped, set it gently on the seat beside the sleeping boy's hand, and moved on without waiting for thanks. The quiet felt earned. At their seats, Elena took out the napkin. "Let me copy this," she said, "in case we lose it." "No one will lose it," Noah said. "It is in your head now, too." She did not argue. She copied it anyway, and then took a photo of both with her phone. Precaution is a kind of love the world teaches you. The neat bearded man pretended to sleep. His laptop was closed, but a little green light in the corner winked like a moth's eye. Elena noted the train car number on a scrap of ticket stub. Old habits of caution stirred. They did not ruin the night, but they stood watch at the edges of it. The train sloped east, then north. Somewhere after midnight it slowed for a switch. The car made a sound like a long, low sigh. Noah leaned his forehead against the window, and the cold glass bit his skin in a way he liked. It told him he was awake and moving. "Tell me about the room," he said. "The conference room?" Elena asked.
Yes. It will have too much air conditioning, she said.
Water in little bottles that make people feel both cared for and disposable. A screen no one needs and a board everyone forgets to bring markers for. People will sit on the edges at first, like they are studying a lake they are not yet sure they want to swim in. Some will ask you questions to show you they know things. Some will ask questions to hide the fact that they do not. "What will you do?" he asked.
"I will stand near the board," she said. "I will make sure the markers work." He seemed satisfied with that. He closed his eyes. The world outside became a long ribbon that ran under the train like a tapeworm of light. Elena did not sleep. She watched the neat-bearded man, and the nurse, and the brothers, and the distant dark. She thought about the wall in the old station, first dirty, then clean, then made holy by the memory of what it had once held. She thought about the look on the professor's face when he wiped the board clean, and about the message from the graduate student with the saved photo. She thought about rent notices and honorariums, and how pride and fear often wear the same suit and call themselves by each other's names. She also thought about her father, who had fixed radios in a shop the size of a closet and had taught her that a good connection is an act of mercy. Near 3 in the morning, the train crossed a long bridge. Beneath them, black water held the moon like a coin. Noah woke at the change in the sound. "Almost there?" he asked. "Closer," she said. He took out the napkin again, not to draw but to look, as if checking that a door he had unlocked earlier was still open. He folded it once, then again, and slipped it into his shoeshine box. The box clicked shut with a small, certain sound. Across the aisle, the neat-bearded man stood and stretched. He nodded to them as if they were old neighbors and made his way toward the vestibule between cars. Elena waited a slow count of 10 and then stood as well. "Bathroom," she said to Noah. In the narrow space between cars, she stopped. The man was on his phone, voice low but clear enough for the steel walls to carry his words. "Presentation tomorrow. Yes, a child. No slides, just a board. Relief model on a napkin, staged depots, small loads first. I will send what I can. We should be ready to move on it before noon." He turned and saw her. His smile came fast and tidy. "You know how it is," he said. "Boss calls at odd hours." "I do," she said. She did not step aside. "Enjoy the rest of your ride." "And you," he replied, slipping his phone away. She returned to their seats and sat down with the slow grace of someone setting a burden on the floor that she had no intention of lifting again. She did not tell Noah what she had heard. Not yet. There is a time for warnings and a time for rest. He slept for the last hour, mouth half open, hands loose. He looked younger than 12 that way, and older, both at once. When the train began to brake for the city, the wheels sang a high, thin note that drew him back to waking. They rolled into the great station just after dawn. The sky over the platforms was a deep pewter, lit from below by the city's own fire. Steam rose like prayer. People stood, straightened, gathered bags, put back on their public faces. On the platform, the neat-bearded man joined the flow of coats and briefcases and vanished the way men like him do, into a corridor of glass and marble, where everything echoes and nothing leaves a mark. Noah and Elena stepped into the cold, clean air of morning. "Hungry?" she asked. "A little," he said. "But I want to see the room first." They walked out into the city, which was waking in 1,000 careful ways. Trucks exhaled at loading docks. Coffee lines formed and dissolved. A street sweeper wrote a slow, wet sentence along the curb and erased it in the same pass. Steam curled from vents like the breath of something that lived under the streets and had learned to be kind. The conference building stood like a stack of clear boxes. Inside, a woman at a desk checked their names and gave them badges that said guest and, in smaller print, speaker. She pointed them toward an elevator that moved so quietly it felt like falling in a good dream. The room was almost exactly as Elena had described it. Too much air conditioning, bottles of water lined up like soldiers, a screen no one needed, and a whiteboard with 3 dry markers, one already failing. Elena uncapped each one and made test strokes until she found the 2 that worked. She set them down with the tips pointing away, like a pair of small tools ready for a surgeon's hand. She opened the blinds a little, then closed them a little less. The light came in as if grateful. Noah walked the length of the whiteboard and back, measuring it with his steps like a carpenter before the first cut. He placed his Shoeshine box in the corner, not hidden, just home. He looked at Elena. "How many people?" "Maybe 50, she said. "Maybe more." He nodded. "Do not worry," he added, as if she had said she was afraid, which she had not. "If the marker's dry, I will use the napkin. If the napkin tears, I will use the bottles. If the bottles roll off the table, I will use my hands." "Good," she said, and her voice did not tremble. Down the hall, doors opened. Voices came closer, the sound of shoes on carpet like waves on a shallow shore. Noah glanced once toward the window, where the city was already knitting itself into the day. "Elena," he said. "Yes?" "If they move the broom back into the corner, we will move it again." She smiled. "Again and again." He picked up the marker. The room filled. A man in a gray suit checked the schedule. Someone adjusted the thermostat with the nervous attention of a person who craves control over small things. The neat bearded man came in last, taking a seat near the aisle. He set his phone face down, but not before tapping the screen twice. Noah stood at the board. In the last second before he began, Elena felt the air change, the way it does in the moment between lightning and thunder. She did not yet see the small threads tightening in the corners of the room, threads pulled by hands she had not met, for reasons she could not guess. Somewhere, quietly, a snare was being set. But here, in this moment, she only saw what was in front of her. A child with a marker and a map inside his head, large enough to hold a country, and kind enough to leave a door open for anyone who needed to pass. Outside, the hallway murmured with the shuffle of the next audience. The air felt as if it had shifted by a single degree, not enough to notice, but enough to change the day. They gave Noah a badge that said, "Speaker in print large enough to be a small kindness." The room had the same bright cold that all conference rooms share, a cleanliness that lives only in the space between carpet and air. A screen glowed at the front like a polite moon. The whiteboard waited beside it with 2 markers that actually worked because Elena had made sure of it. People filed in with the usual choreography. Some took aisle seats as if planning a quick escape. A few sat in the front row as if they wanted to be seen wanting to learn. Most chose the middle where anonymity and attention could sit side by side and not quarrel. A host in a gray jacket tapped the mic. "Good morning. Our next session is an unusual one, an emerging perspective on network design," he said, emerging like a person stepping around a puddle. Elena stood near the board, hands behind her back, guarding the markers the way a nurse guards clean instruments. Noah stood beside the small table with its lineup of water bottles, paper cups, and a neat stack of folded handouts. "Do you have slides?" the host asked in a whisper. "No," Noah said. The host blinked. "We loaded a deck for you this morning." Elena frowned. "We did not send a deck." "It came with your name on it," the host said, unsettled. "Titles, figures, everything." "Show me," Elena said. The host gave a nervous nod to the technician, who clicked. The first slide appeared. A title in heavy letters, The Boy's Shortcut, a critique. The room shifted in their seats. The second slide showed a diagram mislabeled in ways that would make any careful reader flinch. The third called a small correction, a childish mistake, and dressed the insult up as analysis. Someone had prepared a gentle ambush. It was not cruel. It was not honest either. Elena felt the floor tilt under her feet and then tilt back when she saw Noah's face. He was not angry. He was not afraid. He looked like a boy who had watched a cart roll into the wrong corner and was now reaching for the broom. "Turn it off," Noah said, his voice steady, clear. The host hesitated. The technician looked at the host. The neat bearded man from the train sat in the third row on the aisle, hands folded, eyes bright. "Please," Elena said, in a tone that left no space for argument. "Turn it off." The screen went dark. The room breathed once. Noah walked to the whiteboard and picked up a marker. He did not face the board at once. He faced the room. "Good morning," he said. "I shine shoes at a station with 3 platforms and a clean smell after rain. I am 12. A soft ripple went through the room, but he did not ride it. "You want to know about the map that fixes a slow place where trains cross. I will show you without slides. If the marker dries, I will use the bottles. If the bottles roll, I will use my hands." A small laugh, not unkind, the first crack in the ice. He turned to the board. He drew 5 dots for cities and lines between them. Letters would have made the drawing tidy, so he did not use them. He used small words instead. "This one is a big place," he said, touching the center dot. "This one is where food starts. This one is where medicine waits. This one is full of water. This one is short on fuel. The lines are rails. They do not feel like it to you, but they are." He stepped back and looked at it the way a carpenter steps back to look at a wall before he cuts a door. "Everyone here knows how to solve this," he said. "You make a big plan, but big plans get stuck where the lines cross too much. They wait for permission. Small plans move first." He drew a small circle along one line, not at the center, just off to the side. "This is a stage," he said, "a place where small trains stop for a short time. It is not a warehouse. It is not a yard. It is a place where you pass the right box to the right hand. If you put it here," he tapped the center again, "it will drown. If you put it here," he tapped the small circle, "it will breathe." He put the marker down and went to the table. He set 3 water bottles in a line, a paper cup at each end, and a folded program at the side. "The bottles are engines," he said. "The cups are towns. The program is a river over a road. You cannot drive there now. Watch." He rolled the first bottle slowly to the first cup. "This one leaves with only the things that turn other things on. It is light, so it makes good time. At the stage, it gives half of what it has and takes nothing." He set the bottle down, took 2 caps off 2 bottles, and put 1 cap in each cup. "These are batteries. Call them anything small that starts bigger things." He rolled the second bottle. "This one carries tools to clear rails. It does not stop at the center. It stops at the stage and splits its tools." He took the third bottle and moved it an inch. "This one is big. It leaves last. It carries food and blankets and fuel. It can wait its turn because the first 2 already made a door." He did not use numbers. He did not say priority or queue or constraint. He used door. A hand went up in the second row. "We know about staging," the man said, not unkind, not kind. "What is different here?" "Order," Noah said. "You make the order by looking at the way people move when they are scared. They go to last time's hope. Bus stops, church steps, the school gym with the high roof, the station where they met the morning train. You put the stage where memory already knows how to stand in a line." He drew a small square near the center dot, then crossed it out. This stage does not go here. It goes here. He drew a small circle at the mouth of a sideline. This is where the bus would be if it could be. People walk there without thinking. A woman with gray hair and a bright scarf leaned forward. How do you know where memory goes? You ask the ones who already know, Noah said. The nurses, the school janitors, the people who run the church kitchen, and the ones who drive buses when there is no storm. They will point with their whole hands, not just a finger. A low murmur. Heads nodding. A small current of respect moved between rows. The neat bearded man raised his hand. What about theft at the stage? He asked. Crowd control, spoilage. The big plan solves those through centralization. The big plan keeps the door closed until the lock is checked 3 times, Noah said. Meanwhile, people wait in the cold. You still check the lock. You check it fast. You use clear tape and markers. You count small, then you count again, then you send the count with the next bottle and check it against the last count. You put the stage where light falls early. The man smiled like a person chewing a tough nut. So you are saying, improvise. I am saying, prepare to improvise, Noah said. The stage is a shelf you can carry with 2 people. It is a shade tent. It is a board on 2 buckets. It is not a fence to keep people from touching help. It is a table that lets help shake hands. Elena watched the room, arms uncrossed, pens picked up. People wrote not to impress, but to remember. The host cleared his throat. Perhaps we should let our guest show the algorithmic side. There is no algorithm here, the neat bearded man said too fast. This is a child's game. A few heads turned. It was the first unkind thing said aloud. Noah looked at him. It is a child's game, he agreed. Because children know how to hand a thing to another child without breaking it. They do not need a form. They need a line and a reason and a table at the right height. He turned back to the board and drew what looked like a short ladder laid sideways, rungs between 2 rails. Here is the math you want without the letters. Each rung is a minute. Each line is a path. Put the small train on the top line and let it go 3 rungs. Put the next on the next line and let it go 2. Put the big one on the bottom and let it go 1. Now stop and look. The small one has made room. The second has cleared a branch. The big one is rolling. Do it again until your hand knows the rhythm. A man in the back, who had not smiled in 10 years of conferences, smiled. The host lifted a hand half-heartedly. We do also have slides. No, Elena said, quietly, but in a way that put down a flag. From the aisle, someone in a navy blazer stood. Is it not irresponsible to promote folk methods? We have standards. Noah picked up a handout from the table and held it up. This is a standard, he said. Paper in a stack. Order matters. If the important page is on the bottom, you turn the stack over. He turned the handout upside down. Sometimes the standard is the problem. Elena felt a warmth rise in her chest that had nothing to do with pride and everything to do with relief. He was not only holding his ground, he was making the ground. The neat bearded man looked down at his phone and tapped. Somewhere a message went out. In the back row, a laptop flickered. On the screen at the front, uninvited, the dead deck tried to come back to life, a pale rectangle pushing a window forward. The technician swore under his breath, clicked again. Noah did not turn. He capped the marker, uncapped it, made one more small circle on the board. This is the thing that makes it work, he said. It is small. People forget it. He tapped the circle. Call it a mercy buffer. It is 10 minutes you do not think you have and you make anyway. It is the 10 minutes where you let the woman with the baby sit while someone else moves her box. It is the 10 minutes where you let the old man catch his breath. 10 minutes will save more lives than any number anyone will show you today. No one moved. The technician found the right button and killed the ghost slide. The room changed. You could not see it. You could hear it the way you hear the turn in a song when you know the melody will return, but better. A woman in the front row began to clap. She did not look left or right. She simply clapped because she was done being careful about it. Others followed. Then many. The sound filled the square air and made it round. Noah did not bow. He nodded once, a boy at a door holding it open for others. Elena closed her eyes for a second and opened them to a room that had chosen. The applause still echoed in Noah's ears as he and Elena stepped out into the city air. The streets were bright in the winter sun, the kind of cold that made your breath look like something alive, curling away into the sky. The conference building stood behind them, all glass and steel, reflecting a crowd still buzzing inside. They walked a few blocks without speaking. The traffic noise felt different now. Less like a wall of sound, more like a tide pulling at the edges of what had just happened. Elena finally said,
"You were steady in there. You kept the markers working," Noah replied, as if that had made all the difference. They ate lunch at a small cafe with steamed-up windows. The waitress called them Han without thinking about it and brought extra bread without charging them. Outside, buses sighed at their stops, and office workers moved like a slow river in thick coats. It should have been quiet. It should have been a pause. But when Elena's phone buzzed, the pause ended. The message was a link from a friend in Chicago. "Is this you?" The thumbnail showed the conference whiteboard, Noah's circles and lines captured in crisp marker strokes. Elena tapped. The image had already been shared dozens of times on a logistics forum, then reposted on a public social feed with the headline, "The Boy Who Redrew the Rails." She turned the phone so Noah could see. He tilted his head, as if curious about the photo more than the words. "That's the board," he said simply. By late afternoon, the photo had spread beyond the transport world. A local journalist tweeted it with the caption, "12-year-old street shoeshiner presents new rail model at NYC conference." That tweet was picked up by a popular blog, which added, "From platform to podium." The human story behind the math. By the time the sun set, it had been copied into online newsrooms from Boston to San Francisco. At first, the comments were curious. People wanted to know who he was, how he had learned to see the problem differently, why no one had taught him in a classroom. But by nightfall, the tone began to split. Some celebrated the story, calling it proof that talent could come from anywhere. Others raised eyebrows. How could a boy solve what teams of adults hadn't? Was it real or a clever PR stunt? The sharpest doubt came from a post under a corporate logo. "Certain parties have presented work at today's conference without proper attribution." The model in question aligns closely with internal research conducted by our team. The logo belonged to the rival company, the same one the neat bearded man had whispered to on the train. Elena read the post aloud. Noah listened, then asked, "Does that mean they think I took it from them?" "Yes," she said quietly. "But I didn't." "I know." The next morning, a news van parked outside the hotel. Cameras waited by the entrance, lenses like black eyes watching the lobby. The receptionist whispered to Elena as she passed, "They're asking for you, and for him." They went out the side door. Back in their room, Elena's laptop was a wall of open tabs, articles, blog posts, videos clipped from shaky phones in the conference hall. One clip showed Noah moving the bottles and cups on the table. Another caught his line about the mercy buffer. That one was being shared by disaster response volunteers, captioned, "This is why we listen to the people who see the ground first." And then there was the grainy video from the old station.
Someone had dug up security footage from months ago. A boy with a shoebox under one arm drawing on a soot-dark wall with a piece of coal. No headline, no commentary, just the image. When Elena saw it, her throat tightened. "It's you," she said. Noah nodded once. That's the day the wind brought the paper. By afternoon, the argument online had become a storm. Supporters pointed to the station video as proof he'd been thinking about the problem long before the conference. Skeptics claimed it was staged. Anonymous accounts posted that the real work was done by trained professionals, and that putting a child at the center was irresponsible. At the station back home, someone had printed out the photo of Noah's board and taped it to the wall by the water stand. Underneath, in thick black marker, someone else had written, "We know who sees the tracks." That evening, Elena's phone rang with a number she didn't know. She almost let it go to voicemail, but answered. "This is Marlon Graves," the voice said. "Freight desk at the Times. I'm in New York. I'd like to interview you and the boy." "What for?" Elena asked. "For the story that's going to be written whether you're in it or not," Graves said, not unkindly. "Better to have your side." She glanced at Noah. He was sitting cross-legged on the hotel carpet, using coins and bottle caps to build a tiny rail map. "We're not interested in headlines," she said. "That's what everyone says," Graves replied. "Then they find out someone else has told it for them." They met him in the hotel lounge, where the lights were soft and the coffee was better than it needed to be. Graves was in his 50s, with a notebook that looked older than Noah. He didn't start with questions about the math. He asked about the station, about the first pair of shoes Noah had shined, about the wind that carried the paper to his feet. Noah answered simply. Elena added details when needed. Graves wrote without looking at them much, the way a man does when he wants the words to come from the page and not from his face. When he closed the notebook, he said, "They'll still argue, but some will remember this part, the part about the broom." "The broom?" Noah asked. "You moved it," Graves said. "That's what the story is." The article ran the next morning. The headline read, "From coal dust to conference stage, the boy who moved the broom." It included the station photo, the conference clip, and a careful line about disputed authorship. Rival claims have emerged, but supporters point to earlier evidence of independent work. The story traveled further than the arguments. People who'd never seen a freight map shared it because they understood the broom. The broom was any wrong thing set in the wrong place and the quiet act of setting it right. By noon, the landlord back home had called Noah's mother. "I saw the paper," he said. "We'll talk about the rent later." In the late afternoon, Elena and Noah stood on a small pedestrian bridge over the street, watching the city move below. Delivery vans threaded between buses. Cyclists slipped past cars. Every path was a line on an invisible map. "They can fight about the wall," Noah said. "I still see the tracks." Elena looked at him, the boy in a borrowed jacket with the winter wind pushing his hair back from his face. "They can fight all they want," she said. "The door's still open." That night, as the city lit up, Noah sat by the window with a clean sheet of paper. He began to draw, not the rail lines this time, but the streets outside. Each lamppost, each corner store, each crosswalk where people hesitated before stepping off the curb. When he finished, he slid the paper across to Elena. "These are the small tracks," he said. She traced them with her finger. "Every track matters." From somewhere deep in the city, a siren rose and fell, and the lines on the paper felt, for a moment, like they might lead anywhere. The station back home was quieter than usual the morning they returned. Winter light slanted through the glass roof, catching in the dust that hung above the empty platforms. A few pigeons paced near the benches, heads bobbing, as if they too were waiting for a train. Noah stepped down from the bus with his shoebox in one hand. Elena followed with a small bag, the kind you carry when you've been gone just long enough to notice what's changed. It was the same station, but not quite. The water stand had been scrubbed, the notice board held new flyers, and the wall where Noah had once written in coal, the soot-dark brick he'd used as his chalkboard, was clean. Too clean. They walked closer. Sunlight poured across the bricks, showing the rough patches where decades of soot had been scrubbed away. In its place, someone had painted a large white rectangle, the size of a classroom board. And on that rectangle, in careful black paint, was the equation exactly as Noah had written it that first day. Every curve of the letters, every shift in the terms, even the slight lean of his equals sign. Beneath it, a brass plaque read, Noah, age 12. The boy who saw the path when the world saw only the walls. Noah stared for a long time. His shoebox hung forgotten at his side. "Who did this?" he asked quietly. "Maybe the town," Elena said. "Maybe the railway. Maybe just someone who saw the wall before it was clean." He stepped closer, touched the edge of the plaque with his fingertips. "It's not the same as the coal." "No," she agreed. "It will last longer." By noon, word had spread that he was back. People began to drift through the station, the porter with the salt-stained boots, the woman from the ticket window, a conductor who once told Noah he could read a life from a pair of heels. They didn't crowd him. They just stood nearby as if checking that the wall was really there. Noah opened his shoebox and began to work. He shined the porter's boots. He polished the conductor's black leather. He wiped a boy's sneakers until they caught the light. The coins clinked into the tin the way they always had. But the conversations were different now. "You did good, kid," the porter said, watching the polish turn to shine. "Still have to keep the shoes right," Noah replied. A week later, Elena came back from a meeting at the community hall with a folded sheet of paper. She handed it to Noah at his spot on the platform. It was a permit, official and stamped, giving her use of one of the empty station rooms for educational outreach. Under purpose, it read, "Mathematics for those outside the gates." She looked at him. "Thought we could start on Saturdays." Noah considered it, then asked, "Will there be a board?" "There will be a wall," she said, "and chalk." He nodded. Then yes. On the first Saturday, only 3 people came: a retired bus driver, a girl from the bakery, and a boy of about 10 whose mother worked at the laundromat. They sat on folding chairs while Noah drew on the wall, circles and lines, arrows that bent like river bends, dots for towns. He didn't talk about equations. He talked about doors and brooms and mercy buffers. The bus driver nodded often. The bakery girl asked if she could draw her own map. The boy grinned when Noah showed him how to shorten a path by moving just one point. Word spread. By the 3rd Saturday, the room was full. Back in the city, the arguments about authorship faded the way storms do. Not gone, but too far away to hear every drop. The rival company moved on to other projects. The neat bearded man was seen at another conference, speaking about efficiency with no mention of small trains or mercy buffers. But in this small station, the map on the wall stayed. People came to see it not because it was famous, but because it belonged to them now, the way a good story belongs to anyone who's heard it told right. One evening, as the last train pulled away and the platform emptied, Noah stood before the wall. The winter wind slipped in under the roof, carrying the smell of coal from somewhere far down the line. Elena joined him, hands in her coat pockets. "Thinking about New York?" "Thinking about the broom," he said. "There's always another corner." She smiled. "Then we'll just keep moving it." He looked at her. "We?" "Always." Months later, on a summer afternoon, a group of children from the Saturday class gathered on the platform with pieces of chalk. They knelt on the clean bricks and began to draw their own maps. Streets they knew, alleys that cut between buildings, bus stops where they'd waited with their parents. Noah watched them for a while, then opened his shoebox and took out the stub of coal he still carried. He walked to a blank patch of wall beside the painted board and began to draw something new. Not a railway this time, but a web of short lines and circles that looked almost like a constellation. A little girl leaned over to see. "Where's that?" "Not yet anywhere," Noah said. "But it could be." She nodded, as if that was an answer she understood. As the sun set, the last of the chalk maps blurred under the shadows of the roof. The trains came and went, and on the wall, the black lines from the coal shone faintly in the fading light, a reminder that the right track isn't always the one already laid, and that sometimes the first thing you need to move is the broom.